But he's in. Why doesn't it tell you that it's recording?
There. Try again.
Okay.
Okay, it's recording.
Okie dokie.
One crack.
Let's begin. Today's Shir Parashat Vayeshev. It's Perek Lamed Tes. It's the 23 psukim that deal with the seduction story and its aftermath. If you remember from years gone by, Yosef is sold obviously into slavery, and he's purchased by
It's
a liking to Yosef. Yosef is described by the Torah as a very handsome young man, and he's in charge of everything in Potiphar's house, except, of course, his wife. And the wife has her eyes on Yosef. This is what we're going to be learning today. And the seduction story and its aftermath, and how Rabbi Soloveitchik understands that whole story, but he asks a basic question. He wonders why it's essential to our national development to have Yosef experience these terrible experiences. And they're terrible because if you remember, not only he's fake news, right? It's all chart. It's a blood libel, the Rav calls it. It's the first Jewish blood libel. The wife of the chief executioner in Egypt claims that Yosef raped her. And it's so not true, right? So what are we to learn also, the Rav wonders, why do we have to go down to Mitzrayim to become a people? That's the question that is essential to the Rav understanding this story. And why is Yosef sold into Egypt? First, Yosef, obviously, then us, then we go into slavery. And why is he thrown into prison? Why is that so essential to the development of our national identity? What are we to learn from these experiences that become so crucial to whom we are? That is what the Rav is going to deal with in these psukim, in the story of the seduction of Yosef by Eshes Potiphar. So let's take a look quickly at the psukim so we get a handle of the psukim of what the Torah is telling us. By Perek, again, page 216, Hamishi, Lamed Tes, 212, I'm sorry, 212, Lamed Tes, Pasuk Aleph. Yosef hu Ram Mitzrayim, Vayikneu Potipharas Misparo, Sar HaTabachim, Ish Mitzri Miyad HaYishmaelim, Asher Hoidu Shama. And Yosef had been brought down to Egypt. Potiphar, a corridor of Pharaoh, the chamberlain of the butchers. We'll talk about that. He was the main executioner. He's not a butcher selling meat in a shuk. He's the executioner who murders people and ruthlessly. That is who Potiphar is. That's how Onkelos understands who Potiphar is. But we'll come to that in a few moments. So he's a prominent Egyptian. He purchased him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down to Mitzrayim. Vayi Hashem es Yosef, vayi ish matzliach, vayi beves Adonav HaMitzri. Now Hashem was with with Yosef, and he became a very successful person, and he became in charge of this house. Vaya Adonav ki Hashem ito. Now his boss sees that Hashem is with Yosef. Is successful. Page 214, Pasuk Dalet. Vayimsa Yosef chen beinav, vayishares oso, vayikdeo abeso v'chol yeshlo nosam biyado. Yosef found favor in his boss's eyes, and he attended to him. He appointed him over his household, and whatever he had, he placed in his custody. Vayime az hifkido sobeveso, v'al kol sheyeshlo vayivarech Hashem espeis hamitzri biglal Yosef, vayiberkas Hashem b'chol asher yeshlo b'vayisu v'asodeh. And it happened that from the time he appointed him in his house, over whatever he had, Hashem blessed the Egyptian's house on Yosef's account, so that Hashem's blessing was in whatever this man owned. Unbelievable success, right? He invested, it went through the roof, right? It was outstanding. Whatever he did, Yosef was bringing tremendous bracha to this house. And his boss is not oblivious to this. He notes it. He says, boy, things have changed since Yosef's been in charge, and he accounts to the fact that Hashem is with Yosef. Pasuk Vav 6. Vayazov kol asher lo biyad Yosef lo yadai itom uma kim al halechem asher ochel vayi Yosef yifei toar v'yifei mara. He left all that he had in Yosef's custody. He removed himself. He says, you know what, Yosef, you're doing a great job. You run my household. Everything is in your job. I'm not even looking at what you do, except for the bread he ate. And Chazal says, what's the lechem lechol? That's an allusion to his wife, right? That's all that's off limits to you. Everything else you run, I won't even pay attention to. You're doing a great job. Now, Yosef, the Torah tells us, was a handsome, a form. He was a gorgeous looking man. That's what the Torah tells us. Okay, now what happens? Now, after these things, his master's wife cast her eyes upon Yosef, and she said, lie with me. Pasuk 8. There's a very important pasuk. Vayima'en. Notice the shalshelet, the trump on top of it. It's a chain. Mm-hmm. 3 times. That's right. That's the way that it only appears a few times in Tanakh, that trump. And this is one. So he adamantly refused. That's how it's translated. I don't know, adamantly. He refused. He said to his master's wife, look with me. Here, my master concerns himself about nothing in this house. He leaves everything to me. He doesn't even check on me. There is no review of my job description. I'm in charge of everything. Whatever he placed in my custody, he does. There is, right? I'm in charge of everything. Nobody's greater than me in this house. And he says, there is no greater one in this house than I. He was denied nothing. He has denied nothing from me. Since you are his wife, I can't touch. That's the only thing. How then can I do this tremendous evil against him and sin against God? Pasuk 10, test. And I'm Pasuk Yud, I'm sorry. But she doesn't give up. She pursues, right? She tries to seduce him day in, day out. She coaxed Yosef day after day so that he would not listen to her. So he would not listen to her to lie beside her. He won't do it. He doesn't listen to her seduction. Pasuk 11. Then there was an opportune day. Chazal say it was everybody was out of the house. That was an opportune day, right? They were celebrating some celebration of an avodah zarah. That's what Rashi quotes the Medrash. Nobody was in the house. She grabs a hold of his garment, and she says, "Shichva imi, lay with me." He makes a tremendous mistake, right? He leaves that garment in her hands, and he runs out. She sees that the garment is in her hand, and that he's run out. Now she calls the people in the house, and she says, take a look. In other words, she's referring to her husband. Her husband has brought this Ivri, this foreigner, into our midst to do what? To make fun of us, meaning to he wanted to rape me, and what did I do? I screamed out, right? Of course, nobody heard it. But when he heard me lift my voice, screaming, don't rape me, he ran out and he left his garment here. Here it is. And she held the garment until her husband returned to the house. Now Potiphar returns. She repeats the whole story to him. She says to her husband, she says, the Hebrew slave whom you brought to us came to me to sport with me. In other words, she's pointing the finger at her husband. You're responsible for this, Yosef. And what Yosef did, he wanted to rape me until, of course, I stopped him by screaming. This is the bloodline. When I raised my voice and I called out, He left his garment with me and he ran out. When he hears all that she is describing that Yosef supposedly did, he gets angry, right? He gets thrown into the dungeon where all of those who've committed crimes in the country against the king are thrown. But interesting, what should have happened if his boss really believed, if Potiphar really believed all of the accusations, there wouldn't have been any, and there wouldn't be any judicial process. He would have been killed right on the spot, but he doesn't get killed. He gets thrown in. So we know, Chazal say this, we know clearly that he doesn't really trust his wife's accusation. He trusts Yosef, but what does he have to do? He can't embarrass his wife, so he has into the dungeon. That's what he does. Hashem es Yosef ayet elov. Hashem is with Yosef, and he's very, very successful in the jail and in charge of the prison. Notes that. Guess what? Again, like Potiphar, the head of the prison does what? He turns everything over to Yosef. Yosef, you're now in charge of the prison, right? He was in charge. Just it's like a repeat of Potiphar in his house. This is happening now with the next guy. They all are so impressed with Yosef. Yosef is so impressive. He takes over everything, and nobody even checks him. He doesn't even check because God is with him. Whatever he does, he is successful. That is the story. Bottom line, that's the story. Again, the Rav wants to understand, why does Yosef have to go through all of this, and what is that teaching us? So let's take a look at what the Rav has to say. First of all, the Yosef. Let's go back to page 212, Pasuk Aleph. Yosef, Hurad Mitzrayim. And Yosef is brought down to Egypt. The Rav develops his understanding of the entire story of Yosef. And for that matter, the national requirement of Bnei Yisrael to experience slavery in Egypt as a method Hashem used to make us into the moral people and the caring people we are. This is the basis of the Rav's approach to understanding exactly this story and why we had to go to Egypt. Yosef was sold to the chief executioner in order to acquaint him face to face what cruelty really is, what evil really is. He sent Yosef down to Egypt and eventually us down to Egypt to experience the national version of that reality. What is cruelty? When you see cruelty, then you realize the morality of your father and grandfather and great-grandfather. They stood as the antithesis of what Egypt is all about. But you can't appreciate the Jewish morality until you see human suffering and evil face to face. You have to really see it. You have to experience. It's not an October 7th. You have to go down and really see what they did and pay attention. I personally, by the way, I have a very hard time, and this is a personal thing, I have a very hard time reading the testimonies of what happened October 7th. They are so jarring to me. As a human being, I know what happened because I know the end story. And I just don't want to read the cruelty that experienced. I have a very hard time. I have a very hard time reading with what they did. It's just appalling to me. But the Rav is saying Yosef was sent and we were sent. You got to see it. Really, to appreciate Jewish morality, you got to see the antithesis of Jewish morality. Just the opposite. You have to see cruelty. And therefore, who is he sent to? Who buys him? The executioner buys him. The Rav develops this, and I quote the Rav. The Jew had to see and experience evil, tyranny, and ruthlessness. For one cannot hate Satan unless one knows him well and has dealt with him face to stories about Satan, the Rav said, is just not enough. Stories are hearing. You got to see it. Direct experience and involvement, the Rav writes, is indispensable to appreciate what cruelty really is like. Had Yaakov remained in Canaan, his children and future generations would not have developed extra sensitivity for fairness and honesty. We would have not hated cruelty and ruthlessness with the same passion and the same zeal. Had we not spent years of horror, we could not have grown and developed into a great nation, Rav writes. You want to know why we went on to Egypt? It became the crucible for the Jew to understand what we abhor. We abhor this. In pain and despair, we have attained our greatness and our nationhood. Those are the words of the Rav. You want to understand this story? Yosef Huran Mitzrayim, he went there for a reason, because we had to see, touch, smell cruelty. We had to see it. And then we would know what we stand for. And it's just the opposite. Sar HaTabachim, he was bought by whom? By Kneel Potiphar, Swiss Paro, Sar HaTabachim. And the Rav goes, he emphasizes this. It's not a guy selling meat in the shuk, because that Sar HaTabachim can easily be translated the butcher. Yeah, your local butcher, your Doheny kosher. Hey, that's not who it is. Rather, he identifies with Onkelos' interpretation. Onkelos explains he's the chief executioner of Pharaoh. Hashem placed Yosef in such an environment in order for him to appreciate, by contrast, who his father Yaakov was and what the morality that Yaakov stood for. What did Yaakov teach Yosef? The opposite of the Sar HaTabachim. Yosef had to face a hanging, the Rav writes. He had to see the hanging. He had to see Potiphar in action, witness the people thirst and enjoy the spectacle of watching a fellow human being, a victim, suffer. Because that's what they did. They just didn't kill them. They made them suffer. I sensed this, by the way, this past, right after Sukkot, we went for a few days to Rome, to Italy, to 3 cities in Italy. And the last one was in Rome. We spent most time in Rome. And you go visit the Colosseum, and this enormous structure from thousands of years ago was exactly this. What was the Colosseum? The Colosseum was where thousands of people would come and watch human beings tortured. That's exactly what the Colosseum was. It's the Sar HaTabachim. I realized that's what Chazal is talking about. The Sar HaTabachim, this is exactly what happened there. Thousands would cheer a human being suffering, the opposite of what a Jew can tolerate. It's just the opposite, right? How do we know if you're Jewish, Chazal say? Well, one of the ways is if you're Baal Chesed. If this abhors you, then you're seed, then you must be from Jewish seed, right? And if it doesn't, let's go check if you're really Jewish. And could Yosef appreciate what his father taught him? And this, what was the last thing Yosef was chavrusa with his father, meaning his father was, what does that mean? Last with your father. Your father parted with you on a story of Eglah Rufa. It's a fantastic halacha in Chumash Devarim, in the end of Shoftim, then Parashat Shoftim. What happens if you find a person murdered between 2 cities? You don't know him. It's on a plane to. You measure from the body to the closest city. That's what Eglah Rufa is. Whole procession and a whole ritual where you break the neck of the animal, right? In a valley that nothing has ever grown. A whole story about Eglah Rufa. That was the last thing he was taught. Why, the Rav says, would that be the parting lesson that Yosef learned from his father? Because if you remember, the part of that ritual is the zakanim, the elders from the closest city come and they say, our hands did not murder this person. Lo shafku es hadam hazeh. We didn't kill him. We didn't participate. You have to declare that. The leaders have to declare that. That is the opposite of the Sar HaTabachim, right? We would never be involved. Egla Arufa is a sensitivity for the victim, right? You have a dead body, and Chazal is worried, the Torah is worried about no human being should be left alone in the field like that. How did that happen? And you have to take responsibility. And we do take responsibility. And the Medrash says that that's exactly what Yaakov was teaching Yosef. Never lose a sense of responsibility as a leader. Egla Arufa, the Rav says, is the ultimate lesson for a leader to realize you never can absolve yourself from responsibility. He then could appreciate, Yosef could appreciate the spiritual revolution that he was being taught by his father, who was taught by his father, who was taught by his father, meant that Yosef had 3 generations, right? He had a father, a grandfather, 4 generations, him, his father, Yaakov, his grandfather, Yitzchak, his great-grandfather, Avram, all teaching him morality, right? A sensitivity, a responsibility. This is what the Jews stood for. The Rav recounted an unbelievable story. You know, the Rav left Lithuania to go to Germany, right? Because he wanted to learn in the Harvard of Germany. One time Harvard was a good word to say, but okay. Anyhow, but you get my picture, right? So he wanted to, he wanted to have the best in secular knowledge. By the way, who encouraged him? Not his father, his mother. And who was his mother? Yeah, Feinstein. That's correct. His mother was Rav Moshe Feinstein's first cousin. That's correct. I always like asking yeshiva guys, tell me, if the Soloveitchiks and Feinsteins married into each other, who was the one, which family promoted secular studies? And the Soloveitchiks, because they're looking at the world as it is today. So they think about the Rav, who had the Soloveitchik line. His grandfather and his father were not enamored with secular studies at all. It was his mother who introduced him, the Feinstein, who introduced him. He says this in his autobiographical comments. He says, my mother introduced me to literature, to philosophy. So he goes off to Berlin, right? And there he accounts a fascinating personality. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, Dr. Jacob, but Google him, Dr. Jacob Gromer, Grommer, Dr. Jacob Gromer. Who's Dr. Jacob Gromer? He is the right hand to Albert Einstein. He is the mathematician that works hand in hand with Einstein on the gravitational and electromagnetic fields study that made Einstein famous. He became very close to Albert Einstein. He became very close. Who was Gromer? He was a Talmud in a different time to Reb Chaim Brisker. He was one of the outstanding Talmidim of Reb Chaim Brisker. He left it. He left. He did not remain from, but he loved learning. He was a genius, clearly. He was Reb Chaim's one of outstanding of Talmidim, but he decided to go off to Berlin. He became very close to Einstein, and he's credited, by the way, Gromer is credited to be the mathematician that gave insights to Einstein to develop his theories. Okay, so now the Rav encounters, he goes over to Dr. Gromer, and he says, in your opinion, now the Rav documents this. He says, I asked him, tell me, who was a greater moral personality, Reb Chaim or Albert Einstein? Who is a greater moral personality? Listen to what Gromer says, according to the Rav. When I was in Brisk, Gromer says, I found many faults with Reb Chaim. When I came to Berlin, I realized that Reb Chaim was a saint. Einstein, a moral personality. And Gromer says he indeed was a moral personality. But Reb Chaim had more kindness, and he used the word, the Rav said, he used the word to me, chesed. He said Reb Chaim had more chesed in his little finger than Albert Einstein had in his heart and in his brains. Reb Chaim was the ultimate of Baal Chesed. By the way, as just an aside, Reb Chaim left at Tzava, a will and testament, right? He left to his sons that his matzeva should just say his name, the date that he died, and 2 words, Rav Chesed. That's all he wanted. You can go to see his grave in the great cemetery in Warsaw. He died while he was in Warsaw, and they buried him. The Netziv died also in Warsaw, and they're buried in the same ohel, in the same building, in the cemetery. I've been there a number of times. The Matzeva says much more than Rav Chesed, because they didn't listen to him. They didn't want to be accused that they didn't appreciate. So they have a long Matzeva, but that's not what he left on his Matzeva, except Rav Chesed. And the Rav says the following. He says, how did I learn who Reb Chaim was? I had to go out into Berlin to find out who my grandfather really was. Yosef had to go where? To Egypt to find out who Yaakov was. That's why these stories are so important. If you want to understand the beauty of Judaism, you have to have such experiences, the Rav says. That is why the Torah tells us that Joseph was taken to Egypt and he was purchased by the Sar HaTabachim, the executioner who was cruel as cruel can be. It's not coincidence for the Torah to tell us this. It says there are no coincidences in the Torah. He had to see face to face what the antithesis of Jewish morality is to appreciate the greatness of Jewish morality. He had to see, he learned, he says, that's why he tells the story. He says, but now I really knew my grandfather. I really appreciated after I encountered Gromer. And Gromer told me in his little finger, my grandfather had more chesed than in all of Einstein's heart and brains, right? That's the important lesson. Jump to so we know now where he's sold, right? But what happens now? Remember the story. So he's given control over Potiphar's house, and Potiphar's house is being very successful. Everything he touches, everything he invests, it's very successful. So what does Potiphar do? Potiphar closes his eyes and he says, I don't have to worry about my house. My house is being run by the most efficient human being who, whatever he touches, he's successful. I can trust Yosef totally. Isn't that what the Torah tells us? I can trust Yosef. Just not my wife. That's all, right? Well, the Torah tells us then a description of Yosef. What is it? He's gorgeous. And she doesn't ignore that fact. And okay, by the way, Chazal, the Medrash, gives her a positive outlook. She wanted not so much, that's how Chazal understand. She was motivated because she wanted to be part of this personality. She was so taken by his personality, not only by his looks. That's how Chazal give her the benefit of the doubt. She didn't want to seduce. Chazal say she saw astrologically that her line would be married to Yosef. Now, she wasn't sure if it was going to be her or her daughter. Now, we do know who ends up being the wife of Yosef, his daughter, her daughter. Her daughter becomes the wife of Yosef. So Chazal really give her the benefit of the doubt that she wanted to attach herself to this great personality. This is an unusual personality. He has a charisma that is unbelievable, right? He's chen. We'll talk about that in what's chen mean. Chen doesn't mean charm. Chen means you walk into the room and you light up the room, right? There are very few people like this, that unbelievable charm. And he does. He has it. Take a look at Pasuk Ches. So she tries to seduce him, right? Vayima'ain. And he refuses. And we see the shalshelet. Vayima'ain vayomer el eshes Adonav. Hein Adoni lo yoda iti ma boyes. V'chol asher yesh li lo nasam. V'chol asher yesh lo nasam biyodi. He refuses and he says to her, My boss, your husband, has given me everything. I'm in charge of everything except you, right? So the Rav notes the trup on the Vayimo'ain, the chain, right? Vayimo'ain. You see the trup, the musical note. Vayimo'ain, the shalshelas. It's unique. It's impressive. It's the shalshelash. There are those who understand the Vayimo'ain in Pasuk Ches. You see it? Pasuk Ches. Whoops, you have it? Everybody sees the shalshelet, the trup on top of Pasuk Ches, page 214. Vayimo'ain. The Rav says there are those who understand this word meaning. Why is there a trup on? Trup is a musical note. So if your music should indicate what you're thinking. So there are those who understand there was an internal war. He's being seduced by a gorgeous woman too. Is he gonna? It's very tempting. And remember, how old is he? 17, 18 by this time, whoever. He's a young lad. And who is he? He's a foreigner, right? Oh, my boss. Oh, yes, why? In other words, it's alluding to his internal conflict. The shalshel is like indicating, whoa, he's having an internal war. That's not the way the Rav reads it. The Rav rejects that interpretation. The Rav reads it totally said. He says the shalshelet is on top of Vayimo'ain to indicate there's no connection between the word Vayimo'ain and the next word, Vayomer. Vayimo'ain is all by itself. It's like a big comma, Vayimo'ain. And he refused. He refused. He says the shalshelet and the Vayimo'ain and Vayomer separate each other. There is no cause and effect being indicated here. His refusal on her seduction is not being explained in the Torah. He's not explaining it. Vayomer, he's not saying, I can't defy, I'm afraid to defy my boss. That's not the reason. Vayimo'ain, comma. You know what the Vayimo'ain is? It's a shalshelet. What's a shalshelet? Translate the word. Shalshelet is a chain. Oh, the Rav understands. You know why Yosef refuses? Because he has a shalshelet. He has a lineage. He has a chain that goes back to Avram, to Yitzchak, to his Abba Yaakov, right? I read the Rav's words. The reason he refused her advances, and they were seductive, was because of the shalshelet, which means a chain. His patrilineal descent, which impelled him to declare his refusal to be seduced without furnishing ain, comma, finished. You want to know why he refused, the Rav says? Because he knew who he was. That's why he refused. He knew he was the great-grandson of Avram, the grandson of Yitzchak, the son of Yaakov. Vayimo'ain, he had a chain. Vayimo'ain simply means a refusal without any reason being offered as an explanation. You don't need an explanation when you have that kind of genealogy. His refusal, his demurral, all emanated from his father's home. That's what it means. It all came because he was raised by Yaakov, who was raised by Yitzchak, who was raised by Avram. The Rav noted of the Ania, in the Rav's words, the unwillingness surfaces instinctively. It is characteristic of the Jewish people throughout millennia that we will refuse to imitate the non-Jew. And the Medrash Rabbah captures, by the way, this confrontation that the non-Jew has with the Gentile, with the Jew. It says, the non-Jewish world turns to us and they say, how long shall you die and be slain for your God and remain faithful to him? Come to us. We shall appoint you dukes and noblemen, that you may be a mirror for the world. But Yisrael, the Medrash says, responds, do you have the ability to grant us that which we received at Sinai? But isn't that what happened all over? I mean, when you open Jewish history, that's the story. That's the story of Rabbi Akiva. That's the story of Rabbi Tarfon, right? All throughout Tanakh, throughout Hazal, throughout we have the Vayima'en. The Jew refuses to cave in. And the Rav points out, by the way, it's not limited to great scholars, great rabbis, to great Jewish leaders. There were Yidden who did this. They refused Vayima'en to cave in to the non-Jewish seduction. Whatever the seduction may be. The seduction may be, God forbid, a Holocaust. The seduction may be, right? You're going to lose your job if you don't. I told you that's those stories. You're going to lose your job if you don't work on Shabbos, right? That's
the passages talk about being told, well, you'll get more if you convert.
That's correct. And these weren't from people.
No.
And these weren't from people. And this Siegel, the American who moved to Israel,
Siegel.
yeah, what's his first name?
Keith, I think.
Keith. He said, I started wanting to say brachos. I didn't know brachos, but I said brachos, right? I said Shema. You hear this 100%, and they wanted me to talk to Allah. I wasn't interested in talking to Allah. I'm talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Vayima'en, 100%. Vayima'en. They refused, and they do refuse, and it's the regular Jew. It's often the simple Jew that's engraved in his or her soul the shalshelet of the Vayima'en. It's not like the eternal confrontation that Yosef had. Should I cave in or not? No. He's not explaining why, right? He just knows.
You're going to view the shalshelet like that. Why is there a vertical line right after Vayima'en? Isn't that kind of indicating?
Vayima'en. Well, that's exactly Vayima'en. Looks like the Rav. Like the Rav understands it. That's correct. Vayima'en. Stop. Vayima'en stands on its own. It's the shalshelet, a fascinating way to understand the shalshelet. It's the chain of Jewish history. It's our lineage, right? This is the quintessence of the secret of our survival throughout the ages, devoid of dissection or analysis, the Rav wants. He says, you can stand here from doomsday. The analysis is worthless. If you want to understand how the Jew ticks, it's Vayima'en. It's the shalshelet. It's the lineage. We've been taught. That's exactly who we are. That's how the Rav understands it. Go to Pasuk Test, the next Pasuk.
Are those lines in the written Torah?
No, that's Trop. That's Trop.
Right, that's exactly.
Yeah, no, nothing's written in the Torah. 100%. In the Masoretic text, yes, right? But not in the Torah itself. Right. Torah has no dots, that shouldn't say that. That's not true. Sometimes we do have dots on top of we do have crowns on certain letters, and we do have nikudot, sometimes dots. And what of those dots, what do those mean? Yes, but they're very, very, very rare. Okay, so continue on. Pasuk test. Now he answers, right? There's nobody greater in the house. My boss doesn't even look at what I'm doing. Except you. You're off limits, right? And how then can I perpetrate this great evil and sin against God? What these words are allowing us to see is what made Yosef tick. Rav Soloveitchik notes. Yosef, the Rav suggests, simply could not succumb to the temptation because he is whom? Yosef Hatzadik. Why does he get the appellation Hatzadik? Nowhere in the Torah is called Hatzadik, right? But when we say the name, we inevitably say Yosef Hatzadik, right? We say Yaakov Avinu, right? Moshe Rabbeinu. Nowhere in the Torah does it call Moshe Rabbeinu, but you and I will call Moshe in every yeshiva in the world, right? When they're teaching the children about Avraham, about Yitzchak, about Yaakov, Yosef. Now they're teaching, my grandchildren are all learning Parashat Vayeshev in school, and they'll come back and they'll say, inevitably, I say, what's the Parsha about? They'll tell me, Yosef Hatzadik. Where did you get Hatzadik? Why did he get the appellation Hatzadik? So the Rav explains he got out tzaddik because he couldn't understand the concept of sinning. Yosef simply did not sin. Yosef was unlike whom? His brother Yehuda. His brother, which is the story right before this story, where Yehuda and Tamar, Yehuda does sin. Yehuda then does tshuva. Yosef doesn't understand how tshuva works because Yosef never sins,
But
if you will.
He ultimately does this whole thing. He orchestrates
He
tshuva.
orchestrates tshuva, correct. He does. He wants a tikkun for them. But he himself, he doesn't cave into temptation because that's beyond Yosef. Yosef, unlike Yehuda, on the other hand, had the capability of sinning and later doing tshuva, rising from sin like a lion. That's Yehuda, right? He transforms himself. Yosef, he could not understand the concept of tshuva because he never caved into his temptation. That's exactly what the Torah is telling us. With this appreciation, we could understand the declaration of the Gemara in Sota 36b that says that if Yosef had not withstood the seductive approach of Potiphar's wife, Yosef's name would have been erased from Jewish history, the Gemara says. Well, if he would have caved in, Yosef would have been removed from Jewish history. All the good he did, whether it was his genius, his goodness, his mercy for his brothers, or the fact that he saved the Jewish people from destruction, right? That's what Yosef does, would not have mattered at all if he had sinned here. If he had sinned here, then he would have violated the shalshelas, right? He would have violated the shalshelas. There's only eternity with Judaism if we have the shalshelas. If he would have abandoned the shalshelas, then it would have been over for Yosef. That's how Chazal understand Yosef. Yosef receives the appellation tzaddik for numerous reasons, but one of the reasons is because he doesn't cave into the seduction, right? Because he's honorable to the shalshelas. That's why Yosef gets his appellation tzaddik. Continue.
It was pushed, wasn't he? Like, didn't Hashem push him?
That's Chazal. Well, yeah, Yehuda's a different personality. The Mashiach is not coming from Yosef, right? Mashiach is coming from whom? That's right. Yehuda is more of a realistic personality that we can identify with. We have a pretty hard time not perceiving tzaddikim. Remember, I had a Rebbe in Yeshiva, Rabbi Parnas, who used to say, he was a Rosh Yeshiva for many, many years at YU. Baruch Hashem, he's still alive, should only be well. But brilliant Rebbe. And he influenced me enormously in my first years at YU. But he used to say, a tzaddik, we don't relate to tzaddikim. Because we're not, tzaddikim. Who are tzaddikim? Tzaddikim, they never do wrong. I don't know about you, but I do a lot of wrong. I relate to Yehuda. Yehuda makes mistakes, but then he owns up to them and he corrects it. And that's the Mashiach. The Mashiach is going to be from Yehuda, not from Yosef. The Chazal have this concept of Mashiach. Shal Yosef, Mashiach, Yehuda. Shal Yosef, what happens to him? He dies in battle. He doesn't succeed in the end story. The end story is going to be by Yehuda because it has to be somebody that we can relate to as a model that we can emulate. We really can't emulate in many ways Yosef totally. Obviously, Yosef teaches us a lot, but we can't totally emulate Yosef because we're not tzaddikim. Most of us, right? We're not tzaddikim. Okay, continue on. Pasuk Yud Aleph. So there's this day, whatever this day is. Chazal, Rashi quotes that it was a day that they were celebrating their idolatry. Everybody it was a party, and everybody went to the public square. It was an opportune day when he entered the house to do his work, and no man of the household staff being there in the house, right? And he came to the house to do his work. The Rav quotes Rashi, who recounts, based on the Medrash, that just as Yosef almost caved in and succumbed to Potiphar's wife, Rashi says, why didn't he cave in? Rashi says, because he saw the image of his father. Right? He saw the image of his father. As he's about ready to accept the seduction. He sees out, he looks outside the window and he sees his father's image. That's how Chazal understands it. He sees his father's image. Or others say he looked like his father. And he saw in the mirror. I don't know if there were mirrors in those times, but he saw in the mirror, yeah, whatever. Yes, it could be. He saw his own image, and his own image looked like his father. So he saw himself, he saw his father. That's how others understand, right? Some kids look like their parents, and you see them and you go, oh my God, that child belongs to him or her, right? It happens. That's what Yaakov and Yosef were. Yaakov and Yosef, you looked at both of them and you said, father, son, no questions about it. The other 11, you don't know, right? Do they look like the mother? Do they look like father? There was no question. Yosef was the image of Yaakov. So he comes in and Rashi says, he saw, right? He saw his father. And because of that, it stopped him from committing the sin. But what does this medrash mean? The Rav never leaves the medrash unexplained, right? And the Rav says, it's teaching us a thought that the Rav, by the way, would repeat over and over and over again in numerous settings. The Rav noted, there are two elements in filial responsibility. We've talked about this previously. There are two elements in filial responsibility. By the way, who did Chazal think was the ultimate image of kibud of Esav? Esav, of all people, was the paradigm of showing honor to a parent, right? It's Esav, Chazal. But the Rav would point out, I understand kibud, but Esav was not Morah. There are two halachot when it comes to filial responsibility. There's kavod, kibud av ve'em, and then there's ish imo va'aviv tiro. That means Morah. What does Morah mean? Morah is totally different from kavod. The Gemara in Kedushin describes this. He says, what's kavod? How do you honor a parent? You give them food. You take them in and out, right? You take them where they have to go. If they have to go to an appointment, you drive them. You give. You never sit in their chair. That's all kavod. You show honor to them, right? What's Morah? Morah means you recognize your parent as an authority. Authority. Quoting the Rav, as the memory of a parent's physical appearance begins to blur, the greater gap in time, right? Your parent has passed on, the stronger the Morah becomes between you and your parent. That you realized your parent is your source of legacy. He's my authority. Kibud wanes after the parent dies. Morah increases. Esav did not have Morah for his father. Esav had kavod for his father. And that's why, because Esav was the man of the moment. Kavod is now, here, now. Esav never never thought about the future, right? Esav was a man of the moment. He was the warrior. He was the hunter. He conquered time, if you will, right now. Did he worry about what was going to be? No, that's why he sold the firstborn to Yaakov. You're talking about the future? I don't care about the future. Who cares about the future? Esav has no interest in the future because Esav has no concept of Morah. There's no legacy for Esav. Esav is not a bad guy in this perspective. He just doesn't have the Morah. Who has the Morah? Yaakov has the Morah for his parents, for his grandparents. He has a concept, and that's the Vayimain. There's the Shalshelet, right? He has that concept, and he taught it to Yosef. So the Morah that's what Yaakov taught to Yosef, and Yosef carried it on. Yosef sees his father, and that means his father becomes a picture of authority. I can't do this to my father because my father is my authority. And if I would succumb to the seduction, what would I be doing? I'd be letting down whom? My father, who is my source of my morality, who is my source of authority. He is my source of legacy. He's my source of the future. and I can't sever myself from the future, which is not who Esav is. It's not who Lavan was. It's not who anybody else is. It's unique to us in that sense. Mora, correct? Ish aviv ve'imo tira'u. That is why he refuses to succumb. Okay? So now, Pasuk Yudalit.
4.8.
Atikrol anshe beisova tomer lem lemor. Hevi lanu ish ivri l'sachek banu. Ba elai lishkav imi. Right? She called out to the men of her household and spoke to them, saying, "Look, he brought us a Hebrew man to sport with us." By the way, Chazal, to dissect these words, you hear the anti-Semitism here. It's the blood libel. It's the first blood libel. They brought an Ivri, a Jew, a Hebrew, right? He came to lie, but I called out with a loud scream. The Rav asked, why did Yosef endure all of this pain and false accusations? Why did he have to go through that? And he explained this was the confrontation with terror of the first blood libel. The Jew is experiencing the first blood libel. Now we get to understand what it's going to be like. Only after being falsely accused could he fully appreciate the law that really taught the following: you shall not go around as a gossip monger amidst your people. Oh, you're not to do that. You want to learn not to be a Baal Lashon Hara? I'm going to teach it to you. I'm going to show you what happens when you allow your guard down and you act like this. Now he confronted the full implications. By the way, he confronts. Remember, he was all of what did the Torah call Yosef? A nar. When was he a nar? In his relationship to his brothers. He didn't think about the future in those days. He was a nar. And he did what? He spoke against his brothers to his father. Correct? He was a gossip monger to his father. If you will, the Rav says, why does he go through all of this? Because this is Yosef's tikkun. This is Yosef's correction. This is Yosef's, what we call teshuva to a certain degree, right? Yosef is now going to develop into the tzaddik. He wasn't a tzaddik as a kid. The Torah doesn't call him any tzaddik, calls him nar when he's dealing with his brothers. But by this time, he confronts. Why does he have to confront it? He confronts a blood libel and he learns the morality of the Torah, never to be a gossip monger. And finally, take you to Pasuk Chaf Aleph. Vayi Hashem es Yosef, and Hashem is with Yosef in 21, right? And Hashem is with Yosef. Vayet elov chased, vayiten chino beinei sar beit hatzoar. And Hashem is with Yosef, and he endowed him with chen, and he put his favor in the eyes of the prison warden. The Torah keeps on repeating that Yosef has a personality trait. It's called what? Chen. Chen. I remember I told you I'm going to come back to that. It was noted that Potiphar detected this in Yosef back in 39:3 and 4. Go back to the beginning of the story, right? Plus page 214. Vayar Aldonav, ki Hashem ito, right? Potiphar saw that Hashem is with him. Vayim so Yosef, pasuk Dalet. Vayim so Yosef chen be'einav. And Yosef had a chen in Potiphar's eyes, right? Encountered Yosef in Egypt, felt that there was a chen. Now the head of the prison notes it as well. So Potiphar notes it, the head of the prison notes it. What is this chen? So the Rav says, it's not physical beauty. Beauty is a combination of physical factors and external features. That comes from within the human being. It flows from, quote unquote, the Rav, it flows from the deep recesses of a spiritual personality. Chen is a reflection of the divine presence that is in the human being. Yosef had this unique feature because there is an equation that goes hand in hand. Vayehi Hashem es Yosef. And God is with Yosef. And Yosef has chen. Why does Yosef have chen? Because God is with Yosef. Chen is that unique feature of the divine in the human being. That's what Chen is. We mistranslate it as a charm. It's much, much more than a charm. Vayehi Hashem es Yosef. Hashem is with Yosef, and Yosef has Chen. In other words, you want to know the definition of Chen? Chen is what?
Divine
The divine presence in the human being. It is not a charm. It is not a physical beauty. Yosef has that too. But the Chen that overwhelms and so impressive to Potiphar, so impressive to the head of the Beit Sohar, to the Chen. Correct? It's the Chen. Because Hashem is with Yosef. And Chazal then say, and if you pay close attention, and you'll see that when the Paro interpretation in next week's Parsha, right? The interpretation of Paro's dreams, what does Yosef keep on saying? Hashem is with me. Hashem is with me. Hashem has given me this interpretation. Every other word is Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. Who's this Baruch Hashem, right? Oh, that's Yosef. Yosef realizes, and he doesn't shy away from it, right? He doesn't shy away from wearing, if you will, his relationship with Hashem on his sleeve. He lets everybody know it. He says, I'm not who I am just by accident. I'm who I am because Hashem has endowed me with those gifts. Okay, now concluding remarks and then we'll end. The Rav wanted to understand what the Yosef contribution to the survival of the Jewish people was, and that's what he felt this whole story was. And he suggests two lessons. Lesson one, modesty. Yosef's heroic and disciplined response to Potiphar's wife's attempt to seduce him taught us heroic modesty. Heroic modesty. This is at the core of Judaism, and the Gentile world wished to destroy this from within us. The Jew has a heroic modesty. Number one, Yosef taught us that. And Yosef taught us, number two, the Rav says, how to be a Golus Jew. How to be a Jew in Galut. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, no. It's Yosef who becomes the Galut Jew. Yosef taught us how to survive in Golus. Yosef was the first Jew to experience the hardships of Golus, the real hardships. He experienced first what it means to be a Golus Jew in slavery. He was in poverty. He lived in poverty. Then everything turned on its side, right on its head, and he became the viceroy of Egypt. So Yosef teaches us how the Jew is to live in Golus in poverty, and how the Jew is to live in Golus in unimaginable wealth. Yosef becomes a billionaire. He's the first Jewish billionaire. I don't know if you noticed, the Wall Street Journal says there are more billionaires in the world today than ever before. Well, Yosef was the first. He was. Yosef was the first Jew to be a billionaire. He was the first Jew to teach us what it's a Golus Jew in poverty. How do you survive in the Beit HaTzohar where nothing is yours? And how do you survive? Right? He demonstrates that you don't lose your faith in either extreme. Right? He doesn't lose his faith in the Beit HaTzohar, and he doesn't lose his faith in the palace. Yosef becomes the Golus Jew par excellence. So two things that Yosef teaches us. He teaches us modesty in the true sense of the word. And modesty doesn't mean only in the sexual realm. Modesty means how he functioned, who he was, how he was willing to always credit HaKadosh Baruch Hu for everything. That's modesty. That's humility.
Yeah.
Okay?
It's also stark contrast to what he was before he got sold.
He was a nar.
He was not. Yeah, he was
a nar.
And he was arrogant.
Yeah, he was a nar. That's what nar means. He was arrogant. 100%. He was a child. And the Vayima'ain, the Rav wants to say, what is the most important word here in this entire story? Vayima'ain. We understand why Yosef acts the way he acts, because he sees the shalshelet taking him from past into the future, right? It's the chain from now into the future, and he wasn't going to sever it, right? He wasn't going to sever it. Okay, that's this story based on the Rav's insights, and we'll continue next week to make cakes.
Thank you.
Everybody should have a wonderful, wonderful day.
It's interesting to me how Yosef gets into all these situations, and maybe it's not important to the story, but he doesn't say a word. There's no response of Yosef when they put him in jail or something. Maybe it's not important to the story. Just there's no reaction. We don't hear reaction. And that's one thing.
That is his modesty.
It's modesty.
That is his modesty. It's heroic modesty. He accepts HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what he's doing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what he's doing. It's a tremendous sense of bitachon, of security, that God's in control. And that's the chaim that he has. He now totally trusts HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Totally. And look what happens.
So,
right?
so we all have a piece of the divine. So his, I guess, was just, he was living it. So it showed,
100%.
right? That we all have that. So
100%. Remember, the Rav said, the heroic Jew is not necessarily the great scholar and the rabbinic leader. It's the Pashut Jew and Jewess throughout history that is willing to confront the Gentile and not cave in. Right? And that's Jewish history. There are
Thank you, Rabbi Masrin.
That's why we're here today. There are so many that did that were willing to say to the non-Jew, I'm sorry, I'm not caving in. And they gave up the ultimate. They gave up their lives to do it.
We always have to experience it. We can read
Well, no, we're not seen to we don't love the idea that we should experience it. We're Michael D. covered, right? Yeah. I get them. Yeah. No, nobody wants to, but we do.
Maybe kind of like it came.
It does. That's
And yes,
the rising anti-Semitism. I thought about that too. The rising anti-Semitism is a lesson for all of us, right? Who's in charge?
Yeah.
No question about it. But why are we so concerned? I was thinking about this too. The world thinks, why are they so driven by this concern? Because now they blame this little state of Israel, that these Jews are so powerful in this little state of Israel. First of all, we have one little state.
Right.
The world is so opposed to that. But on the other hand, we know where it leads. When we were a nobody, when we didn't have our own land, you killed us. Now we have our own land, you kill us.
Kill us.
You can't tolerate us.
And when we're poor, we're
Right.
Bolsheviks,
Right.
we're rich, we're capitalists.
Right.
It's a whole saying.
No.
Everybody.
No matter what, they right. Esav Sona es Yaakov, Aloha mi Sinai. It's true. I mean, my mother, would always tell us, you want to understand what's going on with Israel? My mother was well enough to talk, but what she always to say, it's jealousy. That's what it is. This little state has produced such success. Hashem matzliach, right? We're matzliach because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with us. The problem is that we shouldn't be haughty and think that it's our own. There's a whole article in Times of Israel. I didn't get a chance to read it, but the editor writes that I saw just the headline. We're back to doing the same stupid mistake of being haughty right now. And we shouldn't allow that haughtiness to control us.
No.
Which is true. We've made that mistake, but we should be like Yosef. Why are we successful? We have to credit who is giving us all of the success. But if you think about it, the miracles since October 7th are massive.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Is there any other country that you know of that went through a war like that, where its economy has boomed? It's gotten strong. There were a few months at the beginning where it looked like the economy was tanking in Israel. The economy didn't tank. The Israeli economy is thriving. Do you know the dollar doesn't compare to the shekel right now?
Is that planning a trip?
Yeah, okay, right. Yeah, or exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. The shekel is rising in power, and
it's 3.2.
yeah, it is 3. It was 3.2 when I was there just a few weeks ago, and it keeps
0.7, 3.8 when we
That's correct.
a couple of years ago.
That's right. It's growing. My big mistake was I didn't invest on the Israeli stock market. That's my mistake. I mean, hey, look what's happening. It's unbelievable. The Israeli stock market is booming.
You know.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
very,
I
very,
think so.
very prominent stock market. Yeah, but again, it's booming. Israelis are doing Baruch Hashem. That little country, right? That little country is the focus of such attention. It's always on the front page of the paper.
It's more attention than
Everything.
New Jersey.
It gets, and you can't even write the word Israel into it on a map,
So small.
right on a globe. You can't even write it.
Oh, it's too
Everybody
small.
is taken by this. You know, the hate is unbelievable. The hatred against us is unbelievable. The blood libels are unbelievable. Genocide? Give me
Yeah.
a break. You know, genocide.
Apartheid.
Right. Apartheid. That's right. That's why you have Arabs on the Supreme Court. Right. You know, and members of Knesset. Right. We know what apartheid is.
Yeah.
Anyhow. Okay.
Thank you. Rabbi.
Okay.
Right.
You read time for Israel?
Thank-
I do.
Thank you, Rabbi.
No.
Really?
So what's that article?